What's the second type of competition? I forgot.
All right, we're on page
Like
168, figure 9-1. We're looking at that continuum
No, there's three.
of types of competition. Page 168, figure 9-1. Figure. Yesterday, we looked at the right side of the continuum. Perfect competition, imperfect competition. Now we're moving over to the left side, and remember those bullet points at the bottom of the chart. So the next one is oligopolies. Poly means to sell. Poly means many. Or few, it means few. So oligopoly literally means selling by a few. So as far as those bullet points at the bottom of the chart on figure 9-1, obviously there's only going to be a few business firms competing against each other. How many firms are in the industry determines whether it's a tight oligopoly or a loose oligopoly. So if the top 4 firms in the industry account for 75% of the sales, we call it a tight oligopoly.
How do you spell oligopoly?
Oligopoly.
And of course, if the top 4 firms account for 50% of the sales, then it's a loose oligopoly. By the way, what if the top 4 firms account for less than 50% of the sales? What is that?
Bad.
That would be imperfect competition. It means it's not an oligopoly. Too many firms competing. All right, so as far as whether they sell differentiated or undifferentiated products, that depends. There are examples of oligopolies that are selling an undifferentiated product, like oil companies, oil refineries. So 87 octane gasoline, for example, is 87 octane gasoline. There's really no difference. Companies try to differentiate their product from the other company by saying theirs has some kind of detergent in there that cleans fuel injectors or whatever. But I don't know anybody that buys their gas because of any detergent additives.
No, I bet it's cheap.
We don't care whose we buy unless we might have a credit card for one or whatever. But otherwise, how do we basically choose?
The cheapest.
The price, yeah, we'll get the cheapest one. I mean, I might pay a little more if it's convenient and I don't have to do a U-turn or something, but generally it's not a brand loyalty. But most oligopolies are going to sell an undifferentiated product, like cars, the auto manufacturing industry. Obviously, not all cars are the same, right? There's all kinds of cars. Economy cars, luxury cars, sports cars, pickup trucks, SUVs, minivans. Again, their ability to control the price of their product is completely dependent on their ability to differentiate their product from their competitors. That's why some cars cost more than others, because either it is better quality, more luxury, better performance in some way, whatever. So they can charge more. We as consumers understand the old adage usually is true, you get what you pay for. Alright, a term here we need to understand is a cartel. Introduce this idea. Because there's so few firms competing in an oligopoly, to avoid just absolute cutthroat competition where they're driving each other out of business, oftentimes, not oftentimes, sometimes industries that are in oligopolies will form a cartel. What that means is instead of competing, the firms are gonna work together for the good of all the firms in the industry. Alright, so an example might be orange growers in Florida. They sell the oranges to the orange juice factories. If they just absolutely compete against each other, they'll be undercutting each other's prices to the point where they'll lose money by selling oranges. And you might think, well, that's great for the orange juice company and the consumer, us consumers, but it's not, because eventually if they can't make money selling oranges, they're not growing oranges, which means the orange juice company closes down, which means we don't have any orange juice, right? So, orange growers have formed a cartel. So instead of just competing against each other, they sit down, they work together, and they say, hey, let's all sell our oranges at this price right here. It enables us all to make a profit. Orange juice companies can afford to pay that much and still make a profit on their orange juice, and consumers are still getting the product of orange juice at a reasonable price. Everybody's happy because of the cartel. Sometimes the word gets a negative connotation because of all the action movies we watch talking about the drug cartels in South America or whatever. But it's kind of the same concept. The drug lords, instead of competing with each other and undercutting each other for prices, they all agree to set their prices at a certain place so that all the drug dealers can make money. Alright, so obviously there are some, if a cartel is selling something that's illegal, then it's a bad industry, but there's also legal cartels because they're selling legal products. Any questions on oligopolies? Right, way over on the left side of our continuum, figure 9-1. One more form of competition, what is it? Monopoly. When you think about it, it means there is no competition. Again, poly means seller, mono means one, so monopoly means there's only one company in the industry. They have no competition. They're the only one selling it, whatever it is. They have a monopoly. Kind of like the board game called Monopoly, right? Isn't that the whole idea? To put all the other players out of business so that you're the only one left that owns any property on the board. You have a monopoly.
That's right. Okay, I did know that. I hate monopoly. What takes games so long? Sit through that.
So as far as numbers of sellers, we know, there's one. As far as the difference of their products, different from who, right? Their product is all that's available. Two different types of monopolies. natural and legal. A natural monopoly, that would be where one company controls 100% of a natural resource. So obviously, no one can compete with them because they can't get that natural resource. That's very rare. In fact, I can't think of any examples. What is more common is a legal monopoly. That would be where the government allows one business the exclusive right to provide a good or a service. No one can compete with them because the government says they're the only one in this area, this state, this city, this county, whatever, that's able to sell this good or service. As far as their ability to control the price, they can name their price. Monopolies are the ultimate price setters. They don't have to differentiate their product from their competitors. They have no competitors, so they can name their price. So an example of a legal monopoly would be FPL, Florida Power and Light, the electric company. Everyone in Florida buys their electricity from FPL. They're the only ones that you can buy. You can't shop around to buy electricity. There's only one place to buy it. They have a monopoly. The government, the state of Florida, gives them that monopoly. And that's for practical reasons. Obviously, the way the electricity gets to your house is through wires hung on poles. Right? So imagine if there was 8 different power companies, we'd have poles and wires everywhere, and it just not work. That wouldn't work. So to make it easy, state of Florida, the government says Florida Power and Light will be the provider of electricity in this state. They have a complete monopoly. However, the government oversees legal monopolies to make sure that they don't charge too much, or whatever. They're allowed to make a profit. They're not part of the government. Florida Power and Light is part of the private sector. Government gives them a monopoly to produce electricity. If they raise their rates too much, the government will step in. They can't do that. They have to get permission from the government to raise their rates. If the cost of generating electricity goes up, well, then they can raise our rates so they can maintain their profit margin. So the obvious problem with monopolies. We don't like monopolies. As consumers, we do not like monopolies. Because if there's only one business selling it, again, whatever it is, if there's only one business selling it, what would happen to the price? Keep going up, right? So let's just make up a scenario, kind of ridiculous, but let's say there's only one place in all of Southwest Florida that you can get a cheeseburger. That's silly, right? There's lots of them. There have lots of competition. But let's say there was no competition. Only one place you could get a cheeseburger. What would happen to the price of cheeseburgers?
Would become the most expensive meal.
So it'd be I don't know, $80 or whatever for a cheeseburger. Let's just throw out a number.
Staple cheeseburger.
They don't have to keep a fair price. If you want a cheeseburger, you'll pay. Right? Nowhere else to go. What do you think would happen to the quality of the cheeseburger?
Go down.
Go down. They have no reason to make you happy. It's not like you can go to their competitors and get a cheeseburger. They don't have a competitor. And of course their service would be terrible. They don't have to make us happy customers. So that's why we hate monopolies. We do not want to see monopolies. It's bad for us as consumers. Because when they have no competition, that leads to high prices and poor quality and poor service. Because there's no incentive to keep us as happy customers. competition is a good thing. The more competition, the better, as far as we as consumers are concerned. So if there's 50 places you can get cheeseburgers, or 6 or 8 or 10 different streaming services that you can watch content on, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, whatever. The more competition there is, the better for us consumers, because what does that do to the prices? It keeps them down, keeps them competitive. If one company wants to charge too much, we'll quit doing business, we won't buy cheeseburgers there, we'll go somewhere else, where we can get a fair deal. And it also, when there's competition, that motivates the businesses to provide good quality. Because if you don't like the taste of the cheeseburger at one restaurant, you'll just go somewhere else, right? And the same with the service. When there's competition, they're gonna have to give us friendly service with a smile, right? Because if they're rude, we'll go somewhere else, take our business, our dollar votes somewhere else.
Well, what if they're rude but they got the best burger?
Well, then it's always up to who?
The buyer.
It's always up to us consumers. We can cast our dollar votes wherever we like. Yep, I might overlook some rude service if you got a tasty burger. So what happens in the real economy, because monopolies are so bad, the government will come in and break them up. The government will not allow monopolies to develop. So if somebody actually did, some cheeseburger restaurant actually did put everybody else out of business, well, the government might come in and break up that unnecessary monopoly.
How do they break it up?
Wouldn't be in a cheeseburger situation because there'd be competition, but sometimes, for example, Bill Gates with Microsoft back in the day, his operating systems, he put everybody else out of business because his ideas were so good. The government broke up Microsoft. They had to break it up into several different companies. He argued in court for years, but he lost. He said, it's not my fault, they couldn't keep up with my good ideas. But he lost.
So he would have been a lot more rich than he is today.
I don't know how much money it cost him, because all those little companies all were great companies too, so.
Xbox.
But the government would do that, and they also oversee legal monopolies, again, like the power company, to make sure that the lack of competition does not cause high prices and inferior products.
Your AC strip.
One more point to make. Let's say that there really was a cheeseburger monopoly in Fort Myers, only one place to get a cheeseburger, and it cost $80, and it wasn't that great, and the service was lousy. What might you or somebody else decide to do?
Try to make my own cheeseburger.
Not only make your own, but do what?
Start my own cheeseburger business.
Yeah, open up a cheeseburger restaurant, right? You might think, wait a minute. I can make a cheeseburger better than this, and I can charge way less than $80 and still make a profit. I'm going into business. And then once you do that, we no longer have a what?
A monopoly.
No longer a monopoly, there's competition.
I've
So
seen
we
it.
don't always need the government to step in and break up monopolies. Sometimes we could just let
The market work.
the market work. And somebody will come up and start competing, and then prices come down, and quality and service goes up. Dylan,
I have seen a cheeseburger monopoly.
where's that?
Have you ever heard of the Krusty Krab?
Why, they so good they have a monopoly?
Good point. Can you show them
Who else
fries
is selling
and
cheeseburgers? Nobody.
Nobody in the bikini bottom?
And then SpongeBob tried to sell his cheeseburgers that were colorful, but then they made people's tongues on them.
All right, you got it, you got me.
To, make better.
But here above the water, there's no cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Alright, here's another important point. A business that, let's say they're a monopoly, they can control the price, can't they?
Yeah.
They can set whatever price they want, but they can't control demand. Let's think of what we've already learned. Demand is the act of buying. So, in reality, if someone really were to charge $80 for a lousy cheeseburger, as hungry as I might be for a cheeseburger, I still get to choose whether I wanna buy it, and I might say, no, that's too much, especially for such a nasty burger. Alright, if the price is too high, we will do without. I'll go get a chicken sandwich, or a taco, or a pizza, right? Or, like we said, some entrepreneur will come along to create a substitute or whatever, a product to compete. And then, of course, there's no more monopoly. So any questions on any of the forms of competition from figure 9-1 on page 168 in your book?
No.
Any of the four?